What's up, everybody? On today's show, we're going to get you caught up with the latest news going on around the conference ahead of SEC Week 8. And we get a monster matchup between Tennessee and Alabama. We'll get you the latest there and the latest on the huge injury to Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. Will he miss the rest of the year? We'll discuss the latest. Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. This episode is presented to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy at PrizePicks. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We got plenty to jump into. Let's do it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And we start with the biggest news to come out of Monday, and that is the news surrounding Brock Bowers. As we know, he left Saturday's game with an ankle injury. News coming out Monday, he will indeed have surgery to, quote, stabilize the ankle, and a full recovery is anticipated, according to Georgia's press release. Now, Bowers had trouble putting weight on that left leg, eventually took a knee, pounded his fist in frustration, and left the game on Saturday after having 4 catches for 22 yards and 2 carries for 11 yards in their game against Vanderbilt. Now, Georgia's had several players have a similar surgery, and many of them have missed several weeks. Typical recovery time for a tightrope surgical procedure is 4 to 6 weeks, but Brock Bowers, the third Georgia player to have this procedure this season. Starting right tackle Amarius Mims, who was a preseason all-conference pick, he had the surgery after suffering a high ankle sprain in mid-September. He has not yet returned to the field. And then tight end Lawson Lucky had the procedure mid-August. He recently returned to action. Of course, quarterback Tua Tagovailoa over at Alabama had the surgery in 2018, missed a month. And wide receiver Cedric Tillman had the surgery at Tennessee last year and missed 4 games. Kirby Smart, talking yesterday, said it's not a lot you can do. It's a game of football. They're going to play tackle. You're going to get injured. You're going to have bumps and bruises. You're going to have injuries and things. We're not going to overreact to it. We're thinking about Brock, but I think he'll be fine. Brock Bowers, to this point in the season, 37 catches, 545 yards, 4 touchdowns. Had some late game heroics in the win over Auburn, and some people are starting to throw his name into the Heisman Trophy conversation, but of course, missing several weeks here, that will be out the window. But without Bowers, Georgia will turn to other guys like sophomore Oscar Delp at the tight end spot. Delp has been a regular contributor. He has 13 catches for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 2 catches for 32 yards after Bowers left the game against Vanderbilt. Behind him, you got the 2 freshman tight ends, Lawson Lucky and Pierce Sperlin. Like we talked about, Lucky just saw action back this past week. Kirby Smart said, I don't know when it's going to be, but it's going to be a Monroe Freeling or a Lawson Lucky moment where a kid's got to go in and play. It's coming. We just don't know who. I tell the guys all the time, there's 22, 44 players, 2s and 3s that we got to get every single rep we can for them so they're prepared for this stretch run of 5 games. It's going to be physical and tough. We may or may not be playing with a full deck. We got to go get better. Now, Reese Davis talking on his podcast Monday about the Brock Bowers injury. He thinks Bowers' absence from the lineup could benefit Georgia later in the year. He said when they come out on the other side and he returns hopefully to full health, they might have developed other weapons by that point, because while it's been great for Carson Beck to have Brock Bowers as a security blanket, with him not being there, he's going to have to find someone else. And then maybe when they're playing the SEC championship game, there might be somebody else along with Brock Bowers who can make big plays. So, the old cliche, a blessing in disguise, maybe somebody else rises to the occasion, but see if it costs Georgia a game in losing Brock Bowers. But of course, hope is he will get healthy in time for another playoff run and an SEC championship game and hopefully another college football playoff appearance. Georgia has their bye week this week, so they are idle. All right, over in Alabama, they are been facing some offensive line issues throughout this season. On Monday, Tyler Booker, lineman, joined the next round for his weekly segment and talked about the struggles there. He said, look, there's a lot of guys on the O-line that are still getting some of their first starts, some of their first major reps, and they just have to figure out how to really embrace the moment, take a deep breath, and be like, okay, I'm here, time to perform. But all those guys have improved a lot, and they just have to continue to improve. We all do. Left tackle has been a big question mark there. Alabama's not found a consistent answer there. Booker saying the thing that's very encouraging about those guys that have been taking reps there, they know what they did wrong. Now it's just time to prevent it from happening, just be more technically sound. Jalen Milroe talking this week with the media about the third Saturday in October, and going to be a good one between Tennessee and Alabama. James Pierce, Tyler Barron, and the rest of Tennessee's D-line have been getting after it, racking up sacks for Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator. But Tennessee's defensive front, can they get after Alabama this week? Well, Milroe was asked on Monday about Tennessee ranking third in the country in sacks. Milroe said, quote, "We're going to have a lot of fun. We don't care about none of that." So Jalen Milroe kind of dismissing the fact that, Tennessee sacks the quarterback a lot, and Alabama gives up a lot of sacks, but we'll see what they are able to do this Saturday. But the Vols, dominant defensive performance in their win over Texas A&M this past weekend. Offensively, still some room to grow. Joe Milton, not exactly on pace where Hendon Hooker was a year ago at this time, but Nick Saban talking about it on Monday about Joe Milton, and he said, quote, "I don't see Joe a whole lot different than what we played against in the past when Hendon Hooker was there. Guy can throw the ball. He's accurate, got a strong arm. He can make plays down the field. They take a lot of vertical shots. Certainly has the capability of making those plays. He's also athletic enough to extend plays in the pocket and run if necessary. We don't tell our defense anything different than any other time we're playing a quarterback. He can't get pushed by the other quarterbacks." So we'll see if Joe Milton is able to put on a stunning performance. We know Hendon Hooker was able to do that against Alabama a year ago, and if Joe Milton can do the same, then maybe they're going to hand Alabama their second loss of the season. Now, as for Tennessee, they've been doing a lot with the ground and pound. Running game has been doing very well for them. Recorded 232 rushing yards on the ground last week against A&M. Jalen Wright led the way with 136 yards. Josh Heupel said, in this game, it changes from year to year, sometimes from week to week. And I did think we had a chance to be a mature physical football team up front this year, but the three running backs are all playing their best football. They have the best understanding what our schemes are. Fundamentally, they're at their best. Thought they had a chance to be a group that could really do a good job in the run game at the line of scrimmage, and they're doing that. Vols hoping for a big game from their running game against Alabama. Now, Josh Heupel talking about a different team so far this year, and it's had him adjust his play calling and his game management. He talked about his philosophy this season. He said each Saturday essentially is a new season. Each game unfolds and the identity of the game takes place during the course of the game. You got to manage all those situations, from play calls to what decisions you're making in special teams, all of it. Proud we got to win. We continually evaluate what we're doing in all areas, try to push those lessons forward. So Tennessee, Alabama this weekend, it's a big one. We'll see who is able to prevail in that one. Of course, we'll have more notes on that one throughout the week. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll continue to go around the conference. Plenty more tidbits to get to, including LSU, Kentucky, and much more. That's coming your way in just a sec. But first, this episode is presented by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. Look, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. The holidays are right around the corner. You guys may be making some seasonal hiring, whatever it is. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to go check out LinkedIn Jobs. They're going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You go to their website, very simple. You post your job for free. You add the hashtag purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile. It's going to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools available to you, like screening questions, going to make it easy for you to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you want to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires against leading competitors. Go check them out. Well, your LinkedIn Jobs helping you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let them get you started off on the right foot. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers coming, checking us out every day throughout this week. We will continue to get you set for SEC weekend. Our buddy Chris Marler will stop by tomorrow on the show, so you don't want to miss that. And a reminder, check us out on Fridays, where we have our Locked On College Football live show previewing the weekend that is to come. Not just the SEC. We talk all SEC here, but they'll be getting you set for the weekend that is to come across the college football landscape. All right, let's dive back into it. We got plenty more to discuss going on around the conference, so let's dive back into it. And let's head on over to Kentucky, where the once proud, undefeated Kentucky Wildcats have now lost 2 in a row after starting 5-0. And the two best teams the Wildcats have played yet this season have both yielded losses. Pretty demoralizing for Mark Stoops and company. And on his radio show Monday, he said that the team called a players-only meeting, said it was a sign of great leadership with his team. Now, don't know if that's going to turn things around for Kentucky, but schedule not going to get much easier. They do get a bye week before they take on Tennessee on October 28th in Lexington. They also still have to host Alabama. Of course, cap off the season with Louisville, who's really good this year. So it'll be a tough stretch for Kentucky, but see what they're made of. Rack up some more wins, and can they get to double-digit wins this year? It'll be a tough test, but a chance. We'll see. All right, over at Auburn, they're coming off their embarrassing loss to LSU on Saturday. Hugh Freeze, talking to the media on Monday, had a long list of injuries heading into their game against Ole Miss. Hugh Freeze said things are not looking good for running back Damari Alston. May not make a return this week, suffered that shoulder injury against A&M, has not played since. Freeze also said defensive back Jalen Simpson was not 100%. He's been dealing with a calf injury. Said they hope to get him back to 100% health before facing Ole Miss this week. Linebacker Austin Keys, he has not played since the season opener, dealing with a thumb injury. He's out of his cast, getting closer to a return. And Freeze said he hopes to get good news about Keontae Scott soon. He has not played since the Samford game, dealing with an ankle injury. Now, Auburn's opponent this week, the Ole Miss Rebels, Lane Kiffin, talking about the challenges of facing Auburn's defense. Tigers have been very good against the run this year, and, of course, good turnover margin with a bunch of interceptions. Like Kiffin said, they coach really well defensively. They don't do a ton of things, but they do them really well. He said Auburn's run defense has simple, effective schemes. Says coaching hard, playing physical. They tackle really well. Defense has allowed 780 total rushing yards, good for 3 yards per carry. Through 6 games this season, the Tigers have allowed just 7 rushing touchdowns. Ole Miss, they've been efficient with their run game. 1,100 total rushing yards, 11 touchdowns on the ground this season. Quinshon Judkins leading the way, of course. 443 yards, 6 touchdowns on 100 carries. And Ulysses Bentley, been a nice little complimentary back there to Quinshon Judkins. And, of course, Jackson Dart, he's got over 300 rushing yards as well. So they get it done on the ground there in Oxford. Rebels coming off their bye week. They'll face Auburn Saturday night on ESPN. Lane Kiffin was asked on Monday whether the SEC has had more consistency and balance between programs this year. Parity is the word that a lot of people like to use. And Kiffin said scores seem like that in terms of parity, noting there's been a bunch of upsets so far. He said they've been around more than they're used to with teams who are consistently competitive. And I said, I don't know if you could make the argument because teams have good players in spots they need help at in terms of, as the transfer portal had an effect on that. But he said a lot of time you need to look at quarterbacks and quarterback play. And a lot of times this year in the SEC, the good quarterbacks are the ones winning a lot of these football games. Lastly, Rebels will go on the road this Saturday. Going to go to Jordan-Hare Stadium. Tough place to play. Lane Kiffin saying very challenging place. Tough team to go play. We've struggled there at times. Ended up winning last year. So new challenge to go try to win on the road there. I think as a program, we've won there once in 20 years. It'll be exciting to have this opportunity to go in there, play a complete game, which we're going to need to win this game. Good news for Ole Miss fans, too. Lane Kiffin said that they anticipate Jordan Watkins playing this week after the wide receiver suffered a hand injury in practice last week. Rebels looking for another SEC West win over at Auburn this Saturday. Over at LSU, ahead of their matchup against Army this weekend, Brian Kelly updating a couple of injured players. He said offensive lineman Emory Jones and Makai Wingo, they are doubtful for Saturday's game. Jones dealing with an ankle injury. Makai Wingo dealing with a lower body injury. Kelly said resting Wingo on Saturday give him a chance to regain full strength on the backstretch of the season. They will have a bye after Army before they get ready for Alabama. Tigers will be without two other key players. Those two key players. They could have wide receiver Chris Hilton back in action this weekend. So LSU should handle Army pretty easily. Brian Kelly asked if he's seeing parity in the SEC this year. He's on the Paul Feinbaum show Monday. He said there's as much parity in this league than maybe it's been in many, many years. That certainly Georgia and Alabama have been the two schools that have been consistently there. LSU in 19, but clearly there is a clearer, deeper SEC in terms of the ability to compete at the top. So I think it's cyclical. Every year in college football, the transfer portal has shown there's a little bit more parity. Free agency in the NFL is what brings parity there. I think there's a little bit more of that balance in the SEC this year. Of course, next year we bring in Oklahoma, Texas. That's a pretty deep SEC when you bring in two more top 10 teams. And other SEC news over at Arkansas, Sam Pittman giving an update on running back Rocket Sanders. He suffered a knee injury in their win over Western Carolina in week 1. And he's come back, just has not looked like himself and kind of struggling to get going. Pittman said on Saturday that Sanders was in rehab last week, did not feel like his knee was 100%. Noted he has, quote, no idea when Rocket Sanders will be back on Monday, saying there was still uncertainty around his return. He said, I don't know. I really don't. Pittman did say that the junior will not play against Mississippi State this Saturday. Said his recovery depends on how he feels in the progression of his rehab. So really just disappointing storyline for a guy who was one of the best rushers in the SEC a year ago, one of the best rushers in the country. Rocket Sanders just has not been able to get back to that form of, what was it, over 1,400 rushing yards last year, 10 touchdowns. Sam Pittman said he does expect a different look from Mississippi State this weekend. Of course, for years they ran that air raid system under Mike Leach, and Bulldogs more balanced this year, running the football with Woody Marks and Will Rogers, a little bit of a different quarterback. Sam Pittman saying they always have a great running back. They have 3 they play, but with Marks, he's a really good player. He's been beat up a little, but bye week probably came at a good time for them. He said they want to run the stretch. They want to run a little counter. They want to run inside zone. They're very similar to us offensively with Will back there. They're not air raid this year by any stretch. Meanwhile, over at Mississippi State, Zach Arnett, talking about this matchup and did not give an update on the injuries to Will Rogers, or to quarterback Will Rogers, suffered that injury in the Western Michigan game, and did not give an update on Woody Marks either. He was wearing a walking boot after going down in that game. Instead, Arnett said that gave them a chance to rest during the bye week. He said gave them limited reps last week because they played the vast majority of snaps this season. Every single guy on our roster is on a day-to-day evaluation. Everyone who's medically cleared to play and able to play will play. If they're not, then they don't. So Zach Arnett being very vague there, but if you're not being committal to either of those guys playing, can we maybe rule out Will Rogers or Woody Marks there in the backfield? We'll see. long week to go here, but hopefully get an update on either of those guys, because that would be a big deal if either of them is going to miss this Arkansas game. And there you have it. That is the latest news going on around the conference. When we come back, we will touch on the players of the week, and also we got some game times for next week in the SEC. We'll get to that here coming up in just a sec. And I want to remind you guys, this episode is presented to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Look, PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Is just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks really simple to play. I jump on there, I make my picks, submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. It's that easy to do. They also offer quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That is what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. With their reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and college football top 25 matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Go check them out right now. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use our promo code lockedoncollege. That will get you that first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use the code lockedoncollege. PrizePicks, their daily fantasy sports made easy. Go check them out today. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. And as we get ready to dive back into it, the SEC, they have announced their players of the week after week 7. And as we dive into it, Florida quarterback Graham Mertz was announced as the offensive player of the week. The defensive player of the week was Missouri defensive end Darius Robinson. Co-special teams player of the week went to Florida kicker Trey Smack, and Tennessee's D. Williams, the return man. Alabama's J.C. Latham was the offensive lineman of the week. Co-defensive lineman of the week went to Tennessee's James Pierce and Arkansas's Landon Jackson. Georgia kicker Peyton Woodring, he earned freshman of the week. But Graham Mertz, man, career high 423 passing yards, as well as a season high 3 passing touchdowns in Florida's win over South Carolina. Mertz rallied Florida for that game-winning 75-yard drive with 2:43 to go after they were trailing by double digits. Of course, Robinson anchored that Missouri D-line in the win over Kentucky at 6 tackles, including 2 sacks. Smack for Florida, he converted 4 of his 5 field goals, including a career-high 54-yarder in the third quarter. Williams scored on a 39-yard punt return, the second of his career for the Vols. J.C. Latham was a pillar on that Alabama O-line, which gained over 200 rush yards in the win over Arkansas. And who else are we missing? Pierce, he had 2 tackles for a loss and a sack for Tennessee. And Jackson finished with a career-high 11 tackles and 3.5 sacks for Arkansas in the close loss to Alabama. Peyton Woodring converted field goals of 30, 31, and a career-best 44 in Georgia's win over Vandy. And lastly, the SEC slate is set for week 9. So remember, we're in week 8. That's coming this week, but they always kind of do the look ahead with the setting game times for next week. So the week 9 slate will feature this. Early on, we will get at 12 Eastern on ESPN. It'll be South Carolina at Texas A&M. So that'll be at Kyle Field. The afternoon game, we'll get Georgia and Florida, the traditional 3:30 CBS game from Jacksonville. Be the last time that one is featured on CBS. It's last year of the SEC on CBS. Also in the afternoon, 2:30 Central on the SEC Network. It'll be Mississippi State at Auburn. And then the 2 night games, we will get Tennessee at Kentucky. That'll be a 7 Eastern game on ESPN from Lexington. And also that in the evening on the SEC Network, 6:30 Central will be Vanderbilt at Ole Miss. So not the sexiest slate in week 9. Georgia, Florida, I think will be interesting. We'll see what Florida looks like. They've been much better this year than I think a lot of people thought. Of course, Georgia losing Brock Bowers. What's that going to look like? What's the offense going to look like without Bowers in the fold? The other one that is intriguing, Tennessee at Kentucky. I mean, what's Tennessee going to look like? What if they lose to Alabama this week? Do they come out stumbling? Or if they beat Alabama, man, they will be feeling themselves. Do they go into Kentucky and just steamroll them? So plenty still to happen here this week that will set up for those games next week. But, man, you got a couple teams that are really in need of wins just kind of looking ahead to next week. I mean, South Carolina at A&M, I don't think either team can afford to lose that game. South Carolina sitting at 2-4. Shane Beamer's going, guys, it'll be very difficult for us to get to 6 wins here. Mississippi State and Auburn, of course, they're both sitting there at 3-3. Auburn gets Ole Miss this week. You lose that one, you go to 3-4. You can't, that spot. Can't afford to lose to Mississippi State there. And, of course, Vandy, look, they've been struggling here. The offense has been decent somewhat, but the defense has just really struggled. Seems like they're going to be really struggling next week against that Ole Miss team. But we'll see what happens when we get there. But, of course, the games happening this weekend, we're going to preview with our buddy Chris Marler later this week as the week gets along. But looking ahead, we will get it'll be Mississippi State at Arkansas in the early game. The afternoon games will be Tennessee, Alabama. That one will be on CBS. South Carolina at Mizzou. Again, tough spot there for South Carolina. Danger falling to 2-5. And then the 2 night games we will get. LSU will host Army. Not a lot of you will be watching that one, but Ole Miss at Auburn should be very intriguing because I think Jordan Hare is going to get up for that one and a chance to hand Ole Miss a second conference loss at the midway point of the season. So we'll see what happens there. But we'll continue to preview those games as the week goes along, get you guys set for SEC week 8 here in the conference. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Come on back and check us out every day as we talk all things SEC football. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Have a great day, everybody. We will talk to you tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC.